Is it good to go now?
Good to go.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so my background is not in farming at all. My background is, I was actually born in South Africa. My parents felt that South Africa was not a very good place to raise children, so we moved to the Netherlands. I grew up just under Amsterdam, ended up studying hotel management, and then joined the army. I felt I was lacking a bit of discipline in my life. I'd never really discovered my boundaries, and I felt like a bit of adventure and a bit of challenge. So that brought me to the army. I really had an amazing time in the army. Really discovered a lot about myself and the world. But after a while in the army, I was an officer, so I was in charge of people. We got deployed to places like Afghanistan, Mali, and more I found myself explaining to more and more people what we were doing while I was agreeing less and less with it. So I realized either I'll become an old bitter man in the army, or I need to quit this, discover what my ideals are, and find something in line with those ideals at a small enough scale that I can also really see the results of the energy that I put in. Because in the army, that was really not there, you know. We did everything that I had in me in Afghanistan or Mali, but those places are still a really big mess now. So I quit the army. I traveled with my partner then. We were in South America on motorbikes, and we hiked the Pacific Crest Trail in North America, so from Mexico to Canada. And it gave me enough time for reflection. And in the beginning, I thought, okay, I need to do nature protection. But yeah, humans have such an impact on the world. And if we're going to win 9 billion people and we all need to eat, and our food production systems are actually going in against nature, it doesn't help to put a fence around a piece of jungle or around a piece of beautiful nature. Because if people are hungry, they're going to tear down the fence, they're going to burn down the jungle, and they're going to put a cornfield there. It's what I saw and what I realized. So then I started thinking, well, if I want to do something like that, then I should focus on food production and see if we can't produce food more in harmony with nature, or in strengthening in a system, in a synergy. And my partner then got problems with her knees while hiking through California. So we decided we would volunteer on an organic farm there and see if that's fit in with the stuff that I had in my mind. And there I learned that the stuff that I sort of figured out for myself and thought I would want to do, that it exists. It's nature-inclusive farming, organic farming, regenerative farming. There's whole studies about it. You can read about it, learn from books. You can do it in practice. So from there, my idea became like, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to become a farmer. And I didn't know anything about farming. So in the end, when we came back to the Netherlands, that brought me to the Wageningen University, because a friend of mine said, hey, but we have one of the best agricultural universities in the world here in the Netherlands. Maybe you should go and see if they can't teach you something about it. And I realized that at a university, you're not going to learn to become a farmer. You're going to learn to think about farming. You're going to understand the processes that are happening in the soil. You'll think about the wider system, maybe even our food system. But at the same time, all my weekends, all my summers, every single free moment that I had, I was visiting farmers, working on farms, trying to really get the practical skills, and telling everybody who wanted to hear, and also people who didn't want to hear, hey, I want to become a farmer, I need land. And that was a big challenge, of course. In the Netherlands, the land is so scarce and there's such a high competition for land, and the prices are so high that land access for new entrant farmers is nearly impossible. But luckily, I came in contact with the grassroots organization Land van Ons, who said, well, we're in the process of buying land, you're looking for land, and what's your plan? What do you want to do with the land? And in the end, that brought us here. While at the same time, I still work a few days a week for the soil biology department in Wageningen to really sort of bring the science and practical world together and bridge that gap.
So how long ago did you start studying at Wageningen? How long for? And
In 2019, I started studying. In 2021, I finished studying. And in 2022, March, we started this farm. So I think on the one side, I was very, very lucky. You know, there's nearly no gap between that I finished getting my theoretical knowledge and that I could start putting it into practice on 25 hectares. So on the one side is luck. On the other side, I also always tell the Wageningen students nowadays, like, okay, but if you really want to do something and you have a dream, the first step is to start making it concrete and to start telling people about it. You need to believe, you really need to believe yourself that it's going to happen, because if you don't believe it, it's not going to happen. And if you believe you can make other people believe it, then in the end of the day, you're going to get there. So starting a farm, especially starting a farm which is supposed to be a complex, resilient system, it needs a lot of skill, a lot of experience and knowledge. And I've always had in my mind that I didn't want to do that alone, or that we didn't want to do it as a farming couple either. So we've always said, when we start a farm, when we find land, we'll do it as a team. And we'll share the burden and we'll share the pleasure with a core team and with a community around it. And by doing that, you can actually divide the responsibilities, and you can gain knowledge individually and bring it into the group. And you could even go on holiday sometimes during the summer season, which you cannot go as an individual farmer. So I want to stress the fact that we do this as a team with Claudia and Alina, and without them it wouldn't be possible.
Awesome. Let's get outside to start a visit.
Let's go. Yeah. So basically that's all the farm of the Biesterhof.
How big is it?
It's 25 hectares.
Right.
And the interesting thing is, it's actually, it was part of the dairy farm on the other side of the road. So it wasn't an actual farm until we started farming here. It was part of a dairy farm. It was 17.5 hectares of perennial ryegrass, and it was 7.5 hectares where they grew corn to feed the cows. It's owned by a grassroots corporation called Land van Ons. It means our land, and it's a citizen movement in the Netherlands. They basically, a bunch of citizens got together and they saw the biodiversity in the rural landscape decreasing over the years. And first they thought, okay, why doesn't the government do something about it? And their answer to that was, okay, the government has a lack of vision for what to do with nature and agriculture. Then they thought, why don't the farmers do something about it? And their answer to that was, often the farmers are in a locked-in system. So they have a lack of financing, or too much financing maybe even for their system, and maybe also lack of knowledge on how to change. So then the third question they asked themselves is, why don't we do something about it, the citizens? And they didn't have an answer to that, so they started the grassroots movement, Land van Ons. And Land van Ons is a cooperative, they have members, and the members put in money to buy agricultural land. Once the organization has purchased a parcel of land, they find a farmer, often an organic farmer, to lease the land below the market price, and then they do demand of the farmer that he farms using the organic principles, and he adds landscape elements and nature on the farm to increase the biodiversity. They started about 5 years ago, and first they bought small parcels of land because they had few members, and as they grew they also see that that access to land is a problem very much in northwestern Europe, because the land is so expensive. If you're not born on a farm, it's nearly impossible to actually become a farmer. So they thought, okay, well, if we have enough money, we could actually buy a whole farm and give new entrant farmers the opportunity to actually set up a new farm according to the principles that they would like to use. December 2021, Land van Ons said, okay, if you want to try it, you guys can have a shot at it.
Awesome. Exactly 3 years ago then.
Yeah, so we've been there for 3 years now.
Let's go and have a tour of the farm.
Yes, let's take a walk. So our idea is the 25 hectares was basically a system designed to feed animals, and then the animals will feed us. But what we know now is that it's more efficient on the places where you can grow food directly for human consumption. It's better to do that. And animals, they can have a role in the system, but only where they actually increase the ecosystem services that the system is providing. So what we've done is we said, okay, the grass has to go, and we want to have a system that produces food for humans directly. And that means arable land. So a lot of the grass is turned into arable land, but we very much believe in agroforestry systems. So combining food-producing trees with arable land. And that's where we're working to now. But here you see, this is a 2-hectare field where we're now planting our first trees for our food forest. So this will be a 2-hectare food forest producing food in 7 different layers, vertical layers basically. The idea is that nowadays with the monocultures we say that's efficient, but efficient is just the way you calculate something. And it's efficient because of mechanization, because of the cost of labor, but it's not efficient in many other ways. And if you think of naturally efficient, this land, if you wouldn't do anything on this land for 300 years, there would be a big beech forest, because that's what this place in context, the nature here evolves into a beech forest. And that's for nature, says, okay, this is the most efficient way for nature to actually catch the energy of the sun and do stuff with that and make it into carbons, sugars, etc. So to think then, okay, if that's the most efficient system, maybe we should use that and emulate what a forest does, but then with woody food producing species. And that's what we do here. So the highest level will be walnut trees, chestnut trees. Below that you could have cherry trees. Below that you can still have the apricots, the apples. Below that you can have berry bushes. Below that you could even still have, you know, in the dark soil, where, because everything's catching the light, you can still have logs with grow mushrooms. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing here.
On 2 hectares, and out of the 25 total?
In total, we'll do 5 hectares of food forest. This is very much Cloudy, my partner's project. It's well, we call it the romantic food forest, but it will be a food forest very much for educational purposes, to stimulate nature connectedness with schools, with children. There'll be a picking garden, a tea garden. There'll be a little, we're digging a pond, and there'll be an amphitheater where we can actually host classes and talk about it and have workshops. And then at the back of the farm we have another 3 hectares, and that'll be a more, again, I don't like the word yet, because that's what we call the productive food forest, but this is also productive, but productive in a different way.
Okay. So there's a difference between the romantic food forest and the productive food forest? The
romantic food forest is very much about experiential learning. It'll have windy paths, and it'll have sectors, you know, so that you can actually, you'll have different sectors that have ripe foodstuffs in different seasons, so that you can actually go, and if you're a self-harvester, you actually know which sector to go to in which season, so that you can harvest things. So it is really about interacting with people. The 3 hectares at the back is part of a pilot in the Netherlands to prove that you can also upscale food forests and actually also include the human efficiency in harvesting. So this is going to be more in straight rows. We'll also take into account that the paths are wide enough for small-scale mechanization, for like a mini tractor and harvesting carts and for pruning purposes, etc. Okay. So that's going to be straight lines, still using those principles of a forest, using those different layers, or the permaculture principles you could also say, but then in a more rational way, so that we can actually also harvest things at a large scale.
I see, yeah.
This is our alley cropping system. Last year, January, this was still an 8 hectare perennial ryegrass field. And this is where we've implemented, this is part of, there are 3 of us as farmers. This is sort of my project, it's my idea on alley cropping. The fields, we have 6 arable fields. They're 36 meters wide, and then we have 8 rows of trees going next to the fields. We have 3 rows of plum trees, then we have 2 rows of hazelnuts, and then we have 3 rows of apple trees. Every row of trees is 5 meters wide, and the plan is to actually grow shade-loving herbs underneath the trees. So also there again, it's a very diverse system, and every part of the system fulfills a function. So what you'll see here is these are the plum trees, and we have some, in Dutch we call them olijfwilgen. So the bushes between the trees, they're, if I would translate it, would be olive willows, but I don't know if that's actually a word. And this is all mint. So we have 5-meter wide strips where we grow mint underneath the trees. And then of course we also harvest the mint. So then what you see is you have 36-meter wide strips with arable land, 5-meter wide strips with the trees, and underneath the trees we grow the herbs. The trees we also have because, well, as you can see today on a windy day, there's nothing actually to stop the wind in this really flat plateau. And if it's a hot, dry summer, then you have a lot of evapotranspiration. So there's so much moisture getting lost from the fields that we say if you put these lanes of trees there, they're actually going to be a wind block. So you'll lose a lot less moisture in your fields and the productivity of your fields will actually go up. And well, as you see, they need to grow a little bit still before they have their function. But
were they planted how long ago?
Last year, April, this was planted.
Okay, so it's only still the.
This is basically there now 1.5 years.
Okay.
And you can see on there, we'll walk that way. That's a different type of plum tree, so we have various different varieties as well, so that we can actually harvest from early in the season until late in the season. And these plum trees, these were also, they were just, the trees there, they were about this size when we planted them, and they just went crazy. The arable land, we also have a concept about the arable land. What you see here is we harvested sorghum. Sorghum is an African cereal crop. It roots up to 2 meters deep. So basically where you have, it looks very much like corn as a plant, but where corn roots very superficial and needs artificial fertilizer and a lot of irrigation, sorghum just goes and looks for its own water, it looks for its own nutrients in the ground. It creates an incredible amount of biomass above the ground. It becomes about 3 meters high. And it has a grain which you can actually just harvest and use as a cereal. So you can use it to make bread. You can use it for pasta. We make our own sorghum wheat pasta. You can brew beer from it. It creates a lot of biomass. Works really well for the soil structure. And what we done is we leave it now like this over the winter because there are certain bird species that very much like to have this stubble. And that's the idea of our arable system. In this area, the cash crops, they're potatoes, they're onions, they're sugar beets. These are all crops that really demand a lot from the soil. They demand a lot of nutrients, and you need to till the soil a lot because, for example, the potatoes, they're in the ground, you know, you have to make them on ridges, and then you have to take it out in October, so you're destroying your soil structure. And we say, okay, the crops that we grow at a large scale, we want them to be crops that all provide additional ecosystem services. So besides providing food, they need to be doing other things for our environment. And sorghum is an example which is amazing for the soil structure. We have, on this field last year, we had buckwheat. So buckwheat is also a very old crop, used to be grown here also by the Romans even. It's very good for pollinators. So it's quite a quick grower, but it flowers a very long time. So it's amazing for biodiversity and for pollination. We had a field with 2 hectares of lupine this year, which is the first time in Netherlands actually that lupine is now being grown at a larger scale. And lupine is seen as for northwestern Europe, where it's difficult to grow soybeans organically. It's sort of the soybean alternative because so it's a legume, binds nitrogen. It has a very wide range of amino acids, so it's a perfect meat replacer. You can use it, you can also process it very easily, so it's used to make the meat replacers, but you can also just eat it as a bean or make it into spreads or things like that. So when we're talking at the scale of hectares, we're always looking at what else can these crops do for us.
Multifunction.
Multifunction.
And what about the demand for these crops, because they're quite special crops,
Yeah.
they're more unusual.
Yeah.
Is it you who decides to produce them and then you go and look for buyers, or do you get a demand from food companies who actually need them?
Yeah, that's a very, that's interesting, and that's something that we're always sort of still also experimenting with ourselves. Basically what I try to do now is I want to grow a crop that provides these additional services, this multifunctionality, but I also want to know, before I grow it, that I have someone who's going to buy it. Our relationship with Land van Ons, the landowner, is very good. So basically we're leasing the land. That means that they don't tell us what to grow or how to do stuff. They just monitor the biodiversity, make sure that we're still farming in an organic way, and then they're happy. But Land van Ons does have 30,000 members by now, and Land van Ons has a web shop. And Land van Ons also realized that, okay, just providing farmers with a lease which is below the market price will not actually help them grow completely alternative crops, providing these services. For that, Land van Ons actually also needs to help provide a market, provide customers. And then you put one and one together, you have 30,000 members who are all part landowner here, then they can also become part customers. So Land van Ons has a web shop, and Land van Ons helps with processing the products that come from the land. And in this case, for example, on this field we're now slowly establishing the green manure. Here you see a more mature green manure already because we use the regenerative principles. We try always to have living roots in the ground.
So these come like you call green manure here,
Yeah.
they're the sort of cover crops.
Cover crops. Basically they're cover crops.
They just come in the winter between productive crops in the summer?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely. But so on this one we had false flax before. This was our cash crop, was false flax, and false flax is harvested and then it's pressed for oil. It's a brassica, so it's part of the cabbage family, but it's basically like linseed, for example, or rapeseed. And but it's a very old variety, again very good for biodiversity. Land van Ons actually presses the seeds into oil and sells the oil in their web shop. So in that sense, by growing this, Land van Ons says, okay, if you grow false flax, we'll buy it all for a good price. So in that way, Land van Ons is a very good partner for us. And in other ways, the wheat, the first field that we walk by is winter wheat. So we grow winter wheat that actually has very good baking qualities. A lot of people don't know, but a lot of the bread baked in the Netherlands, we like our bread sort of fluffy. So it needs to rise a lot. And for that, you need a lot of gluten in your bread. To have a lot of gluten in your bread, you need a lot of protein in your wheat. And traditionally, the wheat in the Netherlands doesn't have that much protein. So actually, we can't bake the bread that we like in the Netherlands with the wheat that comes from our fields. A lot of the bread baked in the Netherlands comes from Italian wheat or wheat from the Ukraine. And our wheat, all the wheat fields that you see in the Netherlands, about 95% of it goes to feed the pigs. Which, yeah, we feel is I understand how we came to that system, but I definitely think we need to move away from that system again. And
that's a massive amount of land used to feed animals, right?
Yeah, I think for not only does a massive amount of land in the Netherlands go to feed our animals, then also for every hectare in the Netherlands that we use to feed our animals, we still have 2 hectares outside of the Netherlands, which is also used. So for example, we get a lot of soybean from South America, North America, to feed our animals again. So feeding animals and then feeding ourselves with animals is incredibly inefficient because animals, they use energy themselves to live and to do. And then second of all, because we get such a lot of feed from foreign countries to feed our animals here, basically all the nutrients in that feed are excreted as manure, and we have a massive nitrogen problem in the Netherlands. Our nature in the Netherlands is traditionally nitrogen poor. And now we have such a lot of nitrogen going through into the sky and then going back down into our nature areas that our nature areas are being destroyed. And basically that's all to do with the intensive livestock system that we've developed here in the Netherlands. So that's why we do it differently.
And that's also one of the reasons why it works better when it's brought together in an agroecological system where animals are part of the farming system. Is that something you do as well?
It's something we will be doing. What we realized is that, so yeah, basically we see animals can play a role in our system, in the niches that we find where they can actually strengthen our ecosystem. The niches that I see are, for example, in the sorghum field that we just saw, the stubble. So what we now see is sorghum is a very tough plant. When you harvest sorghum, you don't harvest all the seeds, so some of the seeds fall on the land. Next year, I'm going to have a weed problem in the sorghum because I'm going to be growing the false flax that was here is going to be on the sorghum field, but the sorghum is going to come in between the false flax, and it's going to be a problem with the harvest. So after I've harvested sorghum, if I then can have 100 chickens in a mobile system, I put the chickens in that field, and they can maybe eat 2 months for free from all the sorghum lying on the ground. Basically, they're eating up my weed problem. They're fertilizing the soil because they're shitting where they on our field, and we have chicken meat and we have eggs. And in that sense, we see animals strengthening the system there, providing ecosystem services for us, and then the products of this animal are sort of a side catch. It's a bonus. So the chicken eggs and the chicken meat are additional to what the animals are actually doing in our system. And well, at the moment, you ask, do we have animals ready? We have 6 beehives for pollination, and we have runner ducks in our market garden. We'll get to them just now.
Okay, yeah, sure.
So the runner ducks, they eat the snails. The runner ducks also lay eggs. Our chef really loves making quiches with the runner duck eggs because they have a really good subsistence for that. And for the bees also. And what I never knew is that actually beekeepers, traditional or conventional beekeepers, they actually take out the honey from the bees before the winter comes. But the honey is actually what the bees use as their winter supplies. So that's what they eat when they're sort of hibernating. And the beekeepers then feed sugar water to the bees during the winter, and we eat the honey. So that we feel is not the way that we would want to work with animals. So the bees, we have them for pollination properties. We actually had ecologists also work out what the carrying capacity of this landscape is, so that our bees don't outcompete solitary bees and other pollinators when there's not a crop. And what we do is the bees are now going into the winter with their beehives full of honey. And next year, spring, when the bees come out again, we'll see how much honey is left in the hives, and that's what we'll harvest.
All right. Yeah.
So again, the bees are there for ecosystem services, and the honey basically is for them or a byproduct for us when they don't need it.
It makes a lot of sense. It's very logical that you have these bees, they're your partners.
Yeah.
They're part of the ecosystem. They work with you, for you.
Exactly.
And so they get to at least enjoy the fruit of their labor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what a lot of farmers that farm in a natural inclusive way or regenerative way do is what we're also trying to do is create complexity. Everything that we do, I think on this farm, is adding complexity to the system. Even our green manures, if you, well, this one is actually not a good example because everything except the Japanese oats was eaten by snails. The snails, they live in this clover and they move. It's been a wet year. But if you look a little bit further, then you'll see that the green manure has got like 5-6 different elements, you know, because it's a complex green manure. All these different plants, they provide, they need different nutrients, they root in a different way, they have a different function, they're eaten by other insects, including our snails. And everything in the farm is like this. So what we say is we want to create ecological and economic resilience through biodiversity. And it works, it's a chicken and egg story, because if this was all still one big potato field and we had a problem in our potatoes, we would be economically dependent on the money flowing from our potato harvest. So that would mean that if there was a natural occurring problem in the potato field, we would have to step in and control that problem, that challenge, with pesticides or herbicides or fertilizer or things like that. So then you're actually immediately stepping in and not giving the nature the chance to actually find its own solutions and find its own balance. However, if you only have 1,000 square meters of potato and you have 90,000 square meters on the same hectare of all kinds of other crops, then you're only for 1/10 economically dependent on the potato crop. So if there's a problem there, you can say, okay, this year we'll be harvesting less potatoes. Luckily, we have a lot of income coming from other crops still. And what you'll see is that then maybe the next year or the year after, nature will have found its own solution to the Colorado beetle in the potatoes, or the Phytophthora occurring in the potatoes. And in that sense, that's where we want to go to, and vice versa. You need the ecological diversity for that as well, because if you want nature to establish this uncomfortable balance, you need to have complexity in your nature for it to be able to find these solutions. Something that has been occupying my mind a lot in the recent months is the thought that quite a lot of First Nation tribes and like a lot of old knowledge coming back says food is medicine. You know, and what we now see in our society is that all these external negative effects from our food system, it's messing with our environment, with our groundwater, with our biodiversity, with our climate, but it's also messing with us. You know, we have all these health-related issues which are also related to our ultra-processed, unhealthy foods. I mean, there's a causal effect to this for all kinds of diabetes and cancer and obesity and stuff like that. And all these things, they're, you know, at the moment we're in a capitalist system. I feel we should step out of that, but that's not that easy. But so everything is translated into money in a capitalist system. But if you look at all these external damaging effects that agriculture is causing at the moment, also for the healthcare and the health cost, it's enormous. You know, it's costing us so much money. The question that you ask, that a lot of people ask is, yeah, but can you earn money with it? I feel the question should actually be, how is it possible that the soil on which we should be providing our food, which is our medicine, how is it possible that that can cost 100,000 euros per hectare? Because if that soil costs that much, then no, we can't ever have an economically sustainable system providing good, healthy, sustainably produced food for our local area. The answer is no. In that system, it's not possible. So I feel something that we really should look at a higher level in the Netherlands or Northwest Europe or the world is community land trusts, is taking common ownership of land in order to produce food in a way that's sustainable for ourselves and for our environment.
I hear you. So two things. One is like the price of land, and finding new models for land ownership.
Yeah.
But what you said before was also about the fact that we don't pay the true cost of food.
Yeah, definitely.
And if we had to include the environmental cost and the health cost, then the food would be much more expensive. And food grown in a healthy way would actually be more valuable.
100%. And an example here is also even, this is 6 meters from here to the wire, and we have trees here. So here we have a rose bottle tree. This, I guess, is an ash. We have all kinds of trees here. Meidoorn, hawthorn, I think in the English. We have 3 rows of trees, 6 meters wide, and goes all the way around the farm. Only along the road, it's not trees, but it's flowers. It's wild flowers, and these are all indigenous trees. We have 50 different varieties, but basically, this is costing us money.
Yeah.
Because not only is it not producing food, so it's not sellable. Secondly, also, the common agricultural policy that divides a lot of agricultural subsidies, 500 billion euros of subsidies in Europe, says we only provide subsidies for the productive land. So if we were growing sugar beet here for Coca-Cola, we would be getting subsidy from Europe to do it. But now that we said, okay, we want to provide biodiversity and a windbreak for our system, etc., it's costing us money. Not only does it cost us money because we're not producing a sellable product, but the government is actually saying, okay, now we're going to pay you less money because you don't have productive land.
Right.
So it's ridiculous.
And there's no subsidies for planting biodiversity strips or agroforestry lines and things like that?
We're getting there. At the moment now, they've sort of started the cap reform, and for the cap until 2026, I think they say, okay, 25% of this money distributed by local governments, through the national governments, through the EU, 25% needs to be towards ecosystem services, which means that it's great, everybody was super happy, but it means that we're still 75% of all the money is still just going to, if you have a hectare and it's marked as agricultural land, it doesn't matter what you're doing on it, but you're getting money. So I feel like that the shift should be further. The farmer, one of the farmers that we work with, he's a conventional farmer in the area. He's a 7th generation farmer in this area. Conventional, but also looking towards more sustainable measures, so learning together with us. He laughed at me. He said, "You've got a 9-year crop rotation." He said, "That's never going to last." And well, my background is in the army, and in the army we always say, you at least have to have a plan so that you can deviate from it. And that's sort of what I feel also with our crop rotation.
Yeah.
We've got a plan. It's really been thought through. We have customers for every crop that we're growing, but in the end, it's still a flexible thing, and we'll deviate from our plan probably next year already again.
Right, yeah. Right, let's move on a little bit, because the December Netherlands weather is kicking in.
Yeah.
Like, it's getting very windy and wet.
Yeah.
But
So having this complex system, yeah, then you do see there's a reason why we move towards monocultures and big fields and things like that, because it is logistically, it is a challenge to actually harvest all these fields at different times, sometimes even with different machines. Then the crop still has to be dried, it has to be transported. So in a certain sense, in the modern way of looking at efficiency, it is a somewhat inefficient system, because transporting small amounts costs a lot more than transporting a large amount. So ideally we inspire a lot of other farmers in the area, and we all start growing small amounts of the same type of crops so that we can combine it and form cooperatives.
yeah.
So for example, the man who lives here, he says, yeah, I very much like your ideas, but he says, I also very much like the view on the mill over there. So there's this historical mill in the distance. Yeah, so as I was just saying, everything that you see, every single small little tree that you see, we've planted. We've planted 10,000 trees since we came here 3 years ago, and here you already see all the small trees that we'll still be planting this winter.
So this is a tree nursery.
This is,
here.
well, we bought them from a tree nursery, and we now put them here in the soil, covered them with clay again and with leaves, so that they can stay here and their roots don't freeze. And then we have 4 days with volunteers during the winter, including next week again, in which we start planting them. And we come here with like 40, 50 volunteers, and then you can plant, like by hand, you can plant 1,000 trees a day.
Right, how do you get these volunteers to come?
Community building. I think we started off with Land van Ons, so Land van Ons had these active members. But besides that, yeah, we do a lot of outreach. We rarely invite people onto our farm. We have our community-supported agricultural market garden, so a lot of people who have a vegetable subscription, they also become volunteer on our farm. People like to feel that they can be part of a small solution rather than just being part of a problem. And what we see is when we have these sort of days, at the end of the day, people actually thank us. They feel grateful that they had the opportunity to come here and plant trees, while we feel they're helping us. So it's very much a reciprocal thing. This greenhouse is also part of the interaction, because we don't have much infrastructure, but we do want to receive people, we do want to host workshops, have school classes come here. We also organize lunch events with produce cooked on our farm, from our farm. And that's what we use this greenhouse also for then, so that we can actually have long table lunches here and stuff like that, even when the weather is bad. What's really important for us, and I think, you know, you've also heard that in my stories already, is like not only to grow food in an alternative system here that we believe in, but also to invite people to join us in doing so, in learning about it, and in also consuming that what we grow. So we really try to have an interactive farm. We work a lot with volunteers. We also invite groups of school kids over, but we also host farm lunches and dinners. And we work with an amazing chef who then actually just walks around the market garden, walks around the farm, harvests all the stuff she wants, and then she cooks a 3-course dinner or lunch and we have long tables there with up to 40 people who then come and listen to our stories and eat our food.
That's amazing. It's I mean, two things I'm hearing here is like the community building aspect of it,
Yeah.
obviously bringing people from the community together
Yeah.
around food and around what you're doing here, but also the concept of enterprise stacking and the fact that
Yeah.
you're doing that with nature already. You're stacking the different layers of nature, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess economically it's kind of interesting to do as well. It's having
Yeah.
all of these different sources of income and they all feed into each other.
Yeah. Nature is redundant. So you have this functional diversity, but within every group that is performing a certain role in nature, you always have multiple species doing that. And if we look at what is efficient in the human concept, redundancy is inefficient. And if you look at our healthcare system, for example, we cut out all the redundancy. But then suddenly we got Corona, and we found out that our emergency care was insufficient to deal with that. And we suddenly had lockdowns and things like that, which cost us an incredible amount of money. And then if you look back at it, you think, okay, we should actually have had more emergency care. In the long run, that would have been more efficient. But I think the same thing with nature on a farm. We create redundancy for nature to actually solve its own problems. But we also create redundancy economically. I think in a few years, if everything goes well, on paper, we'll be earning a lot of money. These are our products at the moment. We have a pasta, which we make from sorghum and from our wheat.
So you make them yourself?
We always find someone to collaborate with. So this is a young pasta maker in Rotterdam. Rotterdam is relatively far away from here. We try to keep it local, but we work with him. Well, first of all, because he's a really good pasta maker, but second of all, he's developing a mobile pasta factory. And we'll be a pilot farm to try this out with, so that probably in 2026, our harvest will actually be processed and made into pasta on the farm. And the same with the beer. We actually sell all our barley to a brewer in Wageningen, a town not too far from here. And then together with them, we make a low alcohol beer. This is 3% alcohol. So that we're not selling, basically we're not selling a drug, but we're selling what we say a nutritious beer. This is what sorghum looks like. I've been talking a lot about the sorghum, but this is what the grain actually looks like.
Yeah.
And so our idea is, even if we're talking about the economy, even with the low lease price we'll pay in the future, labor and mechanization are still so expensive that only selling these extensive crops like barley or wheat or the faba beans, that the costs are still higher than the revenue will be, and we won't be able to pay ourselves a proper salary. So every single crop, we also look at, okay, what type of product can we make from it?
Yeah.
And then we also will be selling it ourselves to the community. So our volunteers are also our customers. Yeah. If we have a lunch with 40 people, they exit through our shed, and they are encouraged to buy some of our products.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. So I heard recently that when you buy a product in a supermarket, typically the farmer gets around 10% or less than of the final price, right? Yeah. The current consumer pays. So if you cut out all of the middlemen and you process it yourself and you sell it directly to consumers, then you potentially have a much more interesting revenue.
Yeah, 100%. And what we now do is, because we're still learning to become really good farmers, so if you then also simultaneously have to learn to make a really good pasta, and you have to find the infrastructure to do that, and you have to adhere to all the hygiene rules, etc. That's too many things in one time. So we now work together with partners in making our products. But we do see then that it's essential that we sell the products directly to the customer. We have the opposite neighbor is a supermarket owner. So of course our products are also in his supermarkets, but that's just because it just makes sense and it's a nice story. Basically, his overhead, our overhead together makes so that the products are more expensive in his supermarket, and he doesn't really earn much money from it, and I don't really earn much money from it. And selling it directly to the customer here, that's the added value, that's the piece of the pie that we need to be economically sustainable.
Yeah, wow. We talked a lot about complexity, but that adds a layer on top of it. Now you need to do marketing, you need to have an online shop, you need to deal with all of that.
So again, volunteers, they also find us. We had a volunteer who helped in the market garden who said, hey, I'd actually very much like to set up a proper bookkeeping system for you, and why not build a web shop? So we now have a web shop which was built and is managed by a volunteer. Pretty soon, so now we've got this. This was sort of the pilot, the bear and the pasta to see, does it work? Will people buy it? Do we earn money from it? The answer is yes. So now we actually are working on a permit which we'll have this winter, but it will be a hardened material. It's called a grasbeton. So it'll have hard elements with grass growing between it so that you can park there the whole winter. And on the parking lot we'll have a small shop. And then we'll not only have the pasta and the bear, but we'll have the false flax oil. We're going to have a lupine product. We have buckwheat pancake flour now as well. So once we have the shop, we'll have a range of products, probably 8, 9, 10 products from our farm, which we then sell in our shop. So it's the next step. But yeah, it's not easy to build a farm from scratch in the way we want to do it. And we're just very grateful that we have so many people around us to help it. We're not building it alone, we're building it with our community.